Hey people, what's going on? I'm the Broken Puppet, and today I'm going to be teaching you the difference between old school and neo-traditional. So I'm going to draw two designs, the same type of designs, just one done old school, one done neo-trad. So I'm going to do a skull with a rose, and I'm going to turn down transparency and draw over the top and show you just how different it is in neo-trad and what makes it different in neo-trad to what makes it different in that. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start off on the iPad Pro in Procreate. Set me a dark red just for quick sketching. Go sketching, technical pencil. So it's going to go off like this. So on the first layer just here, I'm going to do me a circle. Just bring down a little line like this. Create this little box shape at the bottom. Little line halfway through. And do a circle roughly around here. Around here. Don't worry about this point, it's just being like, you know, a bit messy with it. We're just kind of putting everything roughly where it should be. So we know we've got like sort of teeth, jaw, eyes, nose. I'm going to have this curve around here, just the inside part of the skull. I've got little lines just at the top. So that's going to be the basic sort of like rough sort of like shape of the skull. I'm going to have a rose that's going to sit here. So for the rose, I'm going to do a circle and then another circle roughly inside it. Have a little flexion on the outside, just like down the leaves. So that's the basic sort of like shape. Okay, so we're going to sort of build up from the shape and detail it. So just going to turn this down. And it's going to be like our basic kind of guideline. And now we're just going to draw over the top of this. So I'm going to go straight in with a pen for this one. You know, you guys can sketch this out first if you want to make sure you guys get it right. But just for the sake of like showing you how to do it pretty quickly, we're going to do it this way. So you've got the eye here. So the idea about old school is making everything look cool and kind of stylized. So it's not so much about detail and making things look realistic, it's about making it stylized. You know, and that's one of the big difference. You know, it doesn't have the realistic aspect that say neo-trad has. So I'm going to use monoline for this. So you've got calligraphy monoline, fairly thick. So we've got this eye shape. Now rather than doing a circle now, I'm going to make it kind of a bit kind of wavy. So throw that one in there. And have this one. A bit like that. I don't know, it's going to be a bit simpler. I'm going to curve around, make a little dip at the bottom, so you kind of got a triangular shape. So you see they're kind of fitting inside that kind of space. I'm going to curve off here, and come down. I'm going to create this little line, it's going to whip around there. I'm going to create a bit of a dip just around here, just curve in, I think. Just a little hint of it, bit just above the top of the eye. Curve this line in around here. I'm going to create another line over the top, and then another line just there. Just create the top of the head. You can make more, you have like a dagger in it if you want as well. Now, there's loads of different kind of aspects you do, but we're just kind of sort of breaking it down to two simple things so you can see the nice clear differences. So now we've got this done, I'm going to create the teeth in here. So I'm going to come in, just create like a circular kind of shape. Build up some circles to the side, like so. Don't want too many, just a few do. Yeah, to be honest, I never really count my teeth when I'm doing them in drawings. You know, just kind of go until they kind of feel right, and I'm not bothered about getting the exact amount of teeth. I'm not too sure exactly how many teeth there would be for that, to be honest. How many teeth are in your mouth? I'm just gonna be thinking I'm gonna have to count them. I'll do it after the video. So the jawline here, I've kind of made this sort of dip outwards. So it's again, kind of making everything stylized. You know, so the teeth rather than being like actual proper teeth shape, quite a nice kind of sort of curves. We've got these kind of bends. These little line details just here. Same with the rose. So the rose is going to look like an actual real life rose. So I'm just going to bring a line across, dip in once, dip in twice. Another one's going to curve off here, dip once, dip twice. And for the centre part, I'm going to create this curve around. Nice curve, just kind of whips around. Two lines off the edge of that. And it's going to make this kind of curve at the bottom, so the idea is kind of sort of following that circular shape. So you kind of turn that middle circle into a bit of an X shape. Once you've got that, I'm going to add some outside petals. Now, petals on the outside you can do differently. For the one I'm going to do this, so it's got a one little dip. You can go 1, 2, 3 dip. You can go to a point. You can just go around if you want, you can go crazy with it, you can go... There's loads loads of different ways of doing it. You know, like I said, it's all about stylizing. You know, it's all about making the line interesting. You know, sometimes a smooth line is interesting. Sometimes a little bit of a wavy bit can be nice. Sometimes a different kind of edge. You know, but just try and make your lines interesting. I'm getting about 5 of these around here, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So they're all kind of following that sort of bigger circle shape we done. So you kind of got this gap in the middle bit. Great secondary line now, just make it a bit more interesting. Let's see, curve down from that way. Great little line just here, maybe 1. Just there to make that interesting. You don't want to force it too much, you know, but a little line here and there can really make a big difference. Nice kind of wavy curves back in the sculpture, I quite like doing. Come down to the leaf. So you've got this sort of shape here. So what I'm going to do here is kind of a little triangle shape just in the middle. And then imagine come a little bit higher, kind of where it would be like here, leave a little gap I'm going to put. I'm going to create this nice zigzag motion. Just coming down the round. It's a really classic, simple way of doing old school uses. You know, it's simple, but it's really effective. I'm going to do some small ones on the outside. It's going to be like a curve, come out like so. And come back the other way. So see, when you break it down, it doesn't look like a real life leaf. The idea isn't to make it realistic. You're trying to make something that is realistic and then sort of like think, how can I make this kind of cool, kind of just like stylized, you know, and simple. You just got to remember where the old influences came from, like the old sailors and stuff. You know, they weren't natural born, say, artists. They weren't doing life drawings and stuff like that. You know, they weren't studying forms. You know, so a lot of stuff will come around them now, and as it sort of developed over time, especially when sort of comics and sort of like kind of newspapers, sort of like, you know, funny reels and bits kind of come out. You know, I think a lot of influence came from there. I mean, it's not 100% let's say improving it, you know, but if you look at it, you can't help but feel a lot of influence kind of come from that sort of stuff. You know, it's breaking stuff down to being the kind of simplistic. I'm just going to turn off that sketch work we've done there. I'm going to click on this and click reference. It just makes it easier because I can select what I'm doing. I'm going to show you how to kind of shade, you know, because with old school there's a few different kind of ways you can shade. I'll teach you the basic ones. You got to remember, because when you used to do it back in the old-fashioned days, a lot of it was done with like water paint, split shading and inks. You know, there was kind of a little bit of what they'd done. So it all kind of had different kind of effects. So I'm going to select the eyes just for instance. I'm going to show you a few different ways of doing this. You know, one, you can go quite big, kind of make a gradient. Or say when you make a gradient, you want to kind of come to a quick sort of transition in the middle. Like you don't necessarily want to go soft like this. You know, if you've sort of done this, you know, like a realistic kind of like really even soft transition. You know, it does look nice, but it's not going to necessarily look like classic old school. You know, like I would never do that kind of like look for old school. It just doesn't work for me. You know, old school is a lot about quick transitions. You know, it's a great kind of shape. Sometimes bits are going to be blacked out. You know, you've got to remember, black is the key colour when it comes to old school. It's very, very important. If you don't have black in there, it's just not going to feel like an old school piece. You know, sometimes you can go right dead to the point. You know, sometimes, I mean, not necessarily for the skull. Actually, I'll show you with the rose because it's more common with the rose, the way you do it. But when you've got these little bumps here, I'm going to make these really kind of like, to the point, kind of really pronounced kind of shades. Like this. Select this bit here, because I'm going to little shades coming off of this. Basically selecting so it doesn't go around the edges, so I can kind of show the idea of like a quick there, like a very quick transition off of that bit there. So yeah, just trying to find like nice little locations where it works. It doesn't necessarily have to be the realistic ones, you know, like I tend to like follow some more of the kind of realistic sort of transitions like in the corners and stuff, you know, where it's quite nice. One of the areas you want to get like is here, back of the head part, just this section. Nice bit of black just coming out of that. I tend to put a bit of black just off the back of the head. You know, some people come from the front as well. Transition just off the back. I quite like. nice to go for a bit of inspiration. There's quite a lot of those ones, you know. Gani's, you know, an amazing one, you know. You probably recognise it. If you're into old school, you probably know of his work. So I'm going to go down to the rose now, and I'm going to show you what I meant, because sometimes the shading can be like dead to the point. So a lot of time you get a bit of black that will kind of like come off this bit and kind of come off this way. And sometimes in old school, you literally get, you know, like a dead, just perfect shade like that, and then it go into red behind it. You know, sometimes it's done like that, and then underneath we go into say like a darker red, and then underneath it. I mean, this one isn't quite as common, but it's another cool, effective way of doing it. You know, you're basically like breaking down the rose into what it kind of is, you know, in simplistic terms. Personally, I prefer to put it as a shade, and again, just do what I've done before, where you kind of break it off really quick. So rather than go like a nice kind of long gradient, quick to the point. You know, it's purposeful shading, you know, it's really effective. So for these roses I'm going to do just in this little centre part of these petals, just here, just in this really like very pronounced bit of black. And make sure it isn't jet black, you know, because it just won't look right if it's not. Unless you're just going for a red rose, sometimes you can just have red, but if you're going to have shading in there, just make it black, you know, it'll look better that way. So for these little leaves now I'm going to go something like really harsh black. Just whip this in there. Like so. You know, leaves can be one of the exceptions, like here, where you can go a bit sort of soft and kind of fade out into a colour. You know, I say the ones that kind of exceptions are like your sort of the leaves, like wings, or like eagles and stuff. You can do the same thing with that. You can get a bit of a longer gradient, you know, if you want. You know, there are certain things that break the rules, and you don't necessarily have to stick to the rules. You know, it's just generally how it's done. It's not the exact way it has to be done. Are there to try and help you achieve that style, but it doesn't mean it's the only way to achieve that style. You know, another very effective thing in old school is leaving negative space. And what I mean by that is like, see here, you've got the reds, and then you've got this like, you know, space you left blank. This is often done in tattooing, like on the skin as well. You know, it's a very typical technique of old school. You can get like this. You can sometimes just have the colour fade out, which I'll show you on the other petals. Build that in there red, so you've got this nice negative space around the outside. So you can do that the whole way around it, or what you can do is get the reds and kind of like sort of whip shading, so you like sort of flick it out, so it'd be like it's kind of flicked into it, you know, which is a really cool way of doing it, you know. But because I've sort of done it this way, I'm going to turn this down a bit, and we'll do similar to what I've done before, just kind of have it as a slight fade. So if I was tattooing this, I'd be bringing my colour extremely close to the edge, just working little circle formations to kind of like break it off. Because in tattooing, like, you know, you want to sort of do this kind of formation when you tattoo. Now, generally, like the tighter your work is when you tattoo, the bolder the colour will be. You know, like if you're doing this a lot in tattooing, you know, leaving big massive circles, by the time you've gone like this, you can see you've got uneven spaces, and these uneven spaces are going to amount to like a very uneven kind of work, and that red's never going to be bold. So the idea is you want to bring it nice and tight, so you're kind of overlapping what you do. You know, it takes a little bit more time, but it's worth doing it. And to be honest, sometimes you know it's slow to put it in there, but you find in the long run you end up doing it faster because the colour's going in there much bolder, much solid. You're not having to layer it up. Now with me, I can sort of do this, and I can get this in there like first pass. So in one go. It's a very, very effective way of shading. But that's for actual tattooing, you don't have to do that on here. You know, it's just an example. So you see, that's kind of how you sort of do like the inside part of that. Now the inside parts here, you can do a few different colours. You can have it blue. You know, I quite like to go for traditional kind of yellow and caramel tones. So go yellow, a little bit of caramel maybe on the sides. Nothing too crazy. greens, generally like classic old school greens, are quite dark. You know, sometimes more on a kind of sort of browny tone, sometimes on a more kind of like this sort of tone. But with new traditional, like the new sort of age sort of stuff, you know, which is like really nice, you can use, you know, the brighter colours. You don't necessarily have to be stuck to those older ones. You know, there are some people out there doing amazing work with brighter colours in old school. You know, it's one of those ones which is nice, but it's not necessarily has to be done. Got some yellow on the teeth there. Got some caramel just. On the background. I tend not to do this too much if I have too much red in the design. Like I've already got red in the rose here, so I wouldn't necessarily do this for this design, but that's another classic old school feature, is throwing in predominantly red usually as the main colour in the background. So just kind of flicking it off a little bit in the edges, like so. You know, it can be a nice old classic way of doing it. I won't do that because I've already got red in those sections and it just feels a bit too much for me. And I wouldn't like to do that. A lot of old school stuff as well revolves around certain sort of pattern work and techniques. There's not too many pattern works in this. I'll teach us in a separate tutorial a whole bunch of different kind of patterns you can do. But just for now, I'm going to show you, sometimes on the outside edge. Nice little spiral. Sometimes just like some real simple lines come off. Look really cool. It looks like cat whiskers. That's kind of how you draw like an old school skull and rose. You know, there's lots of variations of this. You know, like I said, this is quite a simplistic sort of variation. I would normally go a bit more detailed with my skulls, but I'm just trying to make it a bit more kind of old school so you can see the difference between this and that one. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to merge these down. I'll turn this transparency right down. So we've kind of got the general shape. Now I'm going to draw over the top and you'll see how I would do it in the traditional. So let's let me a dark red. Get my sketching tool back again. Right. So see, you've got the shape of the rose here. So when you're doing that neo-traditional, you basically want to add a hint more of like realistic elements into it. So it's not full realistic, but it's kind of that sort of transition between, you know, old school to realistic. You know, it's got a lot more fun aspects, a lot more kind of sort of unique kind of shading and unique sort of, you know, design work. So I'm going to go new layer on top. So here, kind of got this one here, so whip this out. So it's going to come off a bit further across. Going to make it a bit more dynamic, so the shape's going to kind of come to a point, curve around. So see, you've got the freedom to kind of make a bit more angular kind of shapes, which is really nice. Just there. So see, you're making the shape a bit more interesting. It's got, you know, a bit more kind of not necessarily character, because old school, so it's got its own character, but it's just got that more kind of detailed, how do you sort of describe it? I would say neo-traditional kind of vibe, really. Yeah. Let's do another one, just to kind of sort of shape it a bit better. And you see here, like the old school is just a real simple kind of sort of shape to make the buds. And neo-traditional will generally be a bit more complicated, so here I'm going to sort of bring this one across. Two little loops just in there. Now just to create kind of base for it, and then you kind of generally build up your buds from the base. So using sort of curved shapes, you know, you can sort of bring this around. And I'm going to create another curve just over the top. So you're just kind of building up these kind of curved shapes to make it more interesting. And you end up with something a bit more kind of like this. And the outside edge here, I'm going to make this a bit more curved on the inside. And very traditional kind of neo trail, I'm going to have this one down here, this petal bit. That one kind of overlapping. Just there. So you see, you can kind of layer up neo thread long, and then you can old school. And you can put loads more into old school, and that's a very simple kind of rose. But yeah, neo thread I find you can just play around with it. You know, from neo thread I would normally add secondary sort of compared to what I normally make much larger, you know, for this part. So I bring this right down like this. Something like that. I just find a big sort of one at the bottom, just kind of gives it a nice base to kind of work off of. And generally you find I sort of make them bigger as it comes down, and as it gets a bit high behind, because they sit behind it, I make the top ones a bit shorter. You know, shapes can kind of vary. You can have these ones kind of come to the point. You know, it hasn't necessarily got to be this way, like this one here. You can make this nice kind of curvature kind of one. Sort of like make a bit more sort of diamond shape kind of cutting out. Sort of in there. Simple one for this one. Okay, on the inside. Now it's nice to sometimes add these little lines on the inside, so you can kind of tell like you've got a bit of a sort of more shape to it. You know, so I said that sense of 3D-ness where stuff bends. You'll see it a lot more as we kind of shade it as well. That one there. So you can see the whole shape is very, very different. And the leaves, so I'm going to sort of done the leaves here. You can see it a very simplistic kind of way. You know, my near-traditional ones tend to be quite simplistic as well, but just a very different kind of style. So I'll bring my kind of line out. You know, there's hundreds and hundreds of ways of doing these. But just for an example, this one, I'm going to bring this out. It's going to come this way. So, you know, I tend to bring them out much more. So kind of like kite shapes, I tend to sort of do them. So these ones sort of like, you know, sort of curve back into it, which you can do. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You can bring these out like really wide and sort of bring them around like that. The other short leaves we do here, you can do those with neo-trade if you want, but I tend to make them much longer, kind of spiky sort of shapes, kind of like that. So you can see it's all about sort of like making the shapes a bit more kind of angular, a bit more kind of like interesting. You know, so it's rather than sort of smooth. I keep saying interesting. It makes old school sound like it's bad. It's not. You know, it's kind of hard to describe it. Yeah, it's just making it more detailed. Yeah, I suppose that's the one to do. You know, there's more to it. It doesn't necessarily make it better, but it's more to it. So put those in there, so you can see that's the outline of say neo-traditional one. And then we have the skull. So the skull will be much more sort of, you know, in kind of proportion. So we basically start off with that sort of circle shape around again. And then we bring that box shape down here. Kind of curving up. Towards what you know where the eye lines are, so one there from the eye, one down there. Box shape around. Just down the middle here, it's going to be a sense of like how everything kind of sits. So it's got that sort of bring in the nose. So the nose can be a bit more realistic, so the shape-wise it's going to fit, it's going to be a bit more in kind of proportion to a real body. So I'm going to make a bit more of an angle here, so you can kind of tell the face is a bit kind of bent. I'm going to bring back a little bit of a bridge from the nose. I'm going to curve around from there. Crease up a little touch just here, kind of point down to where the base part of this is. And just in the inside part here, I'm going to make this a little loop that kind of goes back into the nose. It's a really simple way of doing it, but it's definitely neo-trade. The eye's going to come out here. As we get to this outside, I'm going to kind of curve on the inside to sort of show the way the eye bends inwards at this angle. Go that around, and on the inside being bits of like sort of kind of cracks and bits missing. So just whipping some kind of fun lines. Now the best way to do this is just kind of throw them in there and see which looks good. The ones that don't look good, just get rid of. But once you keep playing around with it, you'll find ways of doing it that kind of works and ways that don't work. You know, it's one of the nice ways of kind of sort of personalising it, really. Bring this one out. Curve this one. Inside. I'm going to try and sort of like, not exactly imitate, but kind of get the same rough kind of sort of shapes from that one in this one, rough kind of sort of same position. It won't be the same because of the angle, so I'd like to get a bit of sense of symmetry between them. This curve line just here around the eyes, just going to get a sense of where it's kind of falls for the shadow. On the outside here, like the previous eye, kind of came, the outline was right on the edge of the eye. This one we're going to have a secondary bit where you kind of got the hint of the bone. I'm going to make the cheekbone much more pronounced. So get to this part here, I'm going to curve this. And really bring that in there, just make that much more pronounced. like fairly small. Sometimes they'll have like a gum bit and then teeth underneath. Like that. But I tend to prefer a sort of triangle, kind of spiky variation. As you go further outwards though, they tend to get a bit more sort of chunky as you get towards the like your back wisdom teeth. So the bottom, I mean, it's generally a bit shorter because usually the bottom teeth tend to sit underneath your bottom teeth tend to sit underneath your top teeth. That makes sense. So it's going to kind of go like that. Now the jawline's going to be much more realistic. I'm not going to have it sort of bump outwards. So I'm going to come back like that. I'm going to have this kind of little loop here just before I get a bit of shadow. We'll kind of be on that part there. Again, I'm going to make this cheekbone here quite pronounced. So this is going to come outwards. I like to come quite close to this gap. I don't like this gap to be here too small. I mean too big. Otherwise, in my opinion, it just doesn't quite look right. Put this back here, and again, make this quite close to this part of the eye. I'm going to curve that outwards. And just get the head shape a little bit better. See how that looks. So we got just a fraction more. Yeah, for that second one. You can have little sort of dot details, little cracks inside the skull, secondary lines, which you will do, and I will talk about that as well, because these secondary lines are very key to making stuff look neo-traditional. Because the old schools all done in one specific kind of line, and that one thickness. Neo-trad, I'm doing like several different kind of thicknesses, which I think makes it look much, much better, much more realistic. Squiggle just to the back of the head, on top of the skull, just there. And I quite like that, so now I've got that done, I'm going to turn off the old school one. Just open this up. We'll start off with the monoline again, just put the bold lines, and then we'll come back and do like the refined small detail lines. Now this bit is out of personal preference. A lot of people approach this one very differently. This is just how I approach mine. So I'm going to go over these main lines just here. So, actually, no, I'm going to go actually use my technical pen. I'm going to end up using it anyway in the end. I like technical pen because technical pen gets that flick to the edge, and I actually want that flick. You tend to get that flick a lot more in neo-trad than you do old school. It's very rare you actually really get that kind of flick at the edge in old school. Every once in a while you might tend to get, maybe like an eyelash, on a pin-up. But even then, a lot of time that's done like on a bold line. I'm trying to keep the rough sort of same kind of thickness with the technical pen, but not too worried about it because I said, the varying weight is quite nice. If you're tattooing it, you'd be using a set kind of liner, so it wouldn't be varying too much. But you choose when you kind of want it to vary. The same speed as I do. I know I go very fast with this. Just pause, rewind if you need to. Don't feel like you have to go the same pace as I do. I draw like every single day, so it's just experience. It's the sort of thing anyone can get after time. Just all it takes is time to build your speed up. You're already faster than me then. I'm sure I'm not the original old school one. There's some little detailed lines, like just little lines just up there. Now careful not to overdo it, it's very easy to overdo it with these kind of lines. Just a few little lines just here and there really. Being too messy, it just gets annoying otherwise. So you can see the basic kind of build up there for that part of the skull, for that part of the rose. And I'm going to do the same sort of thing now for the skull. So I'm going to mark out everywhere that is for me a bold line, and then do the thin lines. Especially as we saw like when we started colour it, those sections we done, you often use those for colour transitions, which are very, very important for old school, for neo-traditional. Especially with shading, it can be extremely, extremely important. So just keep marking on these lines. Take your time with it, I'm going very quick just to kind of show you. Can't stress it enough, it's only because I've done these like 100 times over that I'm able to kind of go this kind of speed. I didn't expect you guys to go the same speed. Sorry, my voice sounds a bit off today, I got a bit of a cold. Don't worry, it's not coronavirus, it's just a cold. Line weights, it can be 2, 3, 4, and even more. So here I'm going to add the secondary lines I was on about. So you kind of use these to kind of sort of depict kind of shape and motion. And if you have like a cool kind of sort of line, sometimes it helps to kind of amplify that with like a secondary line, like here. I really like these lines at the teeth, so I'm doing a secondary curve just around here to make them more interesting and more fun. Secondary lines are really good for just making extra shapes. Into it, because the second you start adding too many of them kind of line weights, it just shifts into being neo-traditional. Kind of put them where I kind of think it look good. If I was doing this as a professional piece, I'd probably come back and sort of re-edit a lot of them, sort of take a few little lines out and stuff. Because I'm being pretty quick with this. So I'm putting them in just areas which it can look good. Not areas it necessarily has to be. when you get stage, you can sort of turn it off. That's really left. So you can see how much different that is from the old school variation, and how much more kind of sort of detailed the parts are. It doesn't necessarily mean I can say that it's better, it's just a very different kind of style. So again, I'm going to turn this on to reference now. I'll create a layer underneath, I'll do the black, and then we'll go into colour. So I like to use the spray paint tool normally. I'm going to use the airbrushing so you can see a bit more difference. I'm using the soft airbrush. I use this quite fairly large, to be honest. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to select like a leaf. I'm going to show you like a bit of difference now. Because with the traditionally we kind of want to show off more shadows and more shape with it. You know, it's like around here, I want to create this little dip on the side. So very traditional, very traditional, very typical neo-traditional, let's say that. Get this bit on the side just here. On this side. This is going to kind of come off in this section just here. And then what you kind of get, you get this sort of line around here and this line up from here. So you get this really nice sense of curvature. Okay. And when we do the colour, we kind of amplify this even more by using a darker shade and lighter shades. This line here is, you can see it's a hint of the shadow of the petal from above it. You know, you wouldn't add this kind of sort of shadow in with old school. And then here, I normally do it with the colour, but I'm going to sort of do a little bit of black here as well. The same thing now for pretty much all these bits. So anywhere we kind of feel like there's a bit of a bend, a bit of a nice curve, I'm going to create that curve. Anytime there's a bit of a shadow that kind of fits underneath, we're going to add that. I mean, the shadow doesn't necessarily have to be done a lot, people don't do it. I tend to do a lot because I really like how it looks. So it's necessarily something that's exactly extremely common. Not everyone does. The extent of shadows is only. So I'm just going to do little shadows just before the other side. So it's a little bit here, then just to raise the style bits. Create that some sense of that loop. This one. A bit of shade just come off there. Kind of curve on the outside. So you really want to just try and think of what the shape is of each petal and really sort of just try and think, okay, the shape has a bit of this kind of curve to it, how can I amplify that? How can I show that off? You know, rather than stylizing it, you're trying to figure out how to sort of show the areas off. Again, this part isn't necessarily always done this way, but I quite like to put my black kind of in reverse on my leaves, so I sort of tend to go from the top downwards sometimes. It's not something that has to be done, you know, a lot of times it's done right away, sometimes there isn't no shadow in that part. It's just an area I like to push it. So now what I'm going to do, in a lot of these little line shapes we've done, I'm going to add a bit of shade that's going to kind of come to the edge of these lines. See this bottom part of this jaw? We want to give this little sense that this kind of sits underneath. There's a bit of an indent in this part. So I'm going to put a bit of shade on either side there. There's a bit of shadow just there. said, you don't get with old school. If you look at this here, one pitch black, so I'm just going to turn these down, just select these areas. Black those little ones and nudge inside the eye. Select inside this eye area here just as well. Just around the outside. I've got a little bit around the bottom as well, which is more across the top. You get a sense that it's kind of, in that sort of area. So you see those wires looking pretty nice. So that's what I'm going to select this area just here. I'm going to select these kind of areas one by one and kind of get a little sort of shape as well. Tooth, I'm going to do separately a double nose. Sorry, double as well. I think it's really nice sometimes to kind of sort of pick out different blocks, sort of shade them differently. Sometimes even if it means the area doesn't quite make, say, perfect sense, that little transition just looks really nice. This curvature of this nose. So a bit of shade just up there from the bottom bit, just up like that. Just little areas like this, so just kind of picking out little sections. And these sections just really kind of give a sense of like shape and sort of make it more interesting. Unlike old school, you don't necessarily have to go pitch black on those areas. Sometimes you have more margin area to kind of fail with old school sometimes, because if it just doesn't look right, doesn't have the kind of style to it, it's really noticeable. As where sometimes with neo trad, I suppose you can do something, it's kind of like, it doesn't quite look right, but you can kind of say it's stylized and it makes sense, and people are, oh yeah, it does look good, and in your head you're thinking, nah, that was wrong. Don't let anyone say I told you that. So now those bits done now, so when I amplify a few of the shapes, and this part here just behind. Back of the head, so a bit more black just here, just kind of really give a sense of that being that shape. Just going to select these little butts here, just going to look at a few of these. So you see that's the general kind of black and grey shade, so you can see how different that is. You know, it's the exact same shape design, everything in the exact same place, but you can see just how different it looks. And if you know, by doing this way, you kind of see an idea of what makes the styles different. So I'm going underneath now, I'm going to make colours. So I'm going to colour in the same kind of way. So I'm giving it very sort of like similar to the other one. There's a few layers though, so I'm going to use dark red to begin with. Actually, no, it's going to come in I did light first, actually. Come in with pink. Basically the lightest colour that I want in the whole thing. And so at no point am I going to go any lighter than that. So I put in that in, I can do that, and now I can go to my red. But then I can sort of slowly start working and making it darker. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to keep going over my shadow areas. So everywhere I sort of generally done a shadow, I'm going over. And once you've kind of got that red in there, I'm going to go to a darker red now. This for each one of these now. So I said, just going in like the light shade first, and then red, and then going in with a deep dark red afterwards. Sometimes you exceptions to certain areas I'm going to leave deliberately pink. You know, it adds a bit of a stark contrast against the other colours. It's actually a feature you can use in old school as well. So when I do it, you can actually apply it to old school as well. I'll explain it as I do it. I like those two bit a bit lighter there, so I'm going to leave those two a little bit lighter than the rest. So see, I'm just putting on the colours now. But if you're doing on paper, same thing, just with your pens and markers and stuff. You know, it's not that hard to make the transition. It's a bit slower on paper, but you can still achieve all this on paper. You know, don't worry about that. So I've got this red around the outside, did a little highlight down the middle. And darker reds just on the outside. You can see it just gives it that sense of curvature, that bit of sense of 3D-ness where it's not 100% realistic, but it has those little elements to kind of make it feel a bit more realistic. And these bits I said, so a few of these areas I'm going to leave actually deliberately pink. This area here. Yeah, this one bring it half this reds, and then the other half pink. And it just makes a really nice little feature, you know, that's separate from this but complements it. These ones are yellow, this one's going to be red. So it's going to go yellow to begin with. And here we're looking really kind of caramel, similar to what we've done with the old school one. The sort of difference is that here, maybe when it bends, I'm going to make this kind of sense of it bending here. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Sometimes from the edge it just looks nice. I generally do it from the edge, but it's just showing you another option. So let that pink in there, so I forgot to put a pink on that bit. Again, this one, I think I'm going to leave this one a bit different to the rest. Actually, I'm not to the line. A bit of a dark red on that. There we go. Now I like it. And then I've got that done. I'm just these outside ones. I'm going to make these a different green to the inside parts. So I'm going to make these ones more brown. I'll normally make mine kind of golden tone, but I'm going to stick to traditional colours here. So this kind of browny greenish kind of tone. And these inside parts, I'm going to hit the green. Shade just underneath the bottom of the teeth. And each one I'm just going to get a little bit of a hint just on the side, just going to make each two kind of feel a little bit kind of curved. Then I might come back with a bit of a lighter tone, just put a little bit of a highlight just down. So I'll go to the yellow, get a nice kind of highlight. Just put that there, so much good. Other colours in there, you could throw in sort of like other sort of tones, you know, just make it a bit more kind of bony and stuff. But the idea is I'm sort of showing you the sort of, you know, how similar it is to the old school one. So what I'm going to do now, just to kind of make it really clear so you can kind of see exactly everything, I'm going to merge these down. guys just onto a white background. Turn on that old school one now. That's it. And now when I turn this down, see the transition. So old school rose, old school. Neo rose, that's cool. So you can see the big difference between them. So any sort of confusion, this should hopefully help you guys sort of like really see the difference between them. Neotrad's more detailed, it's got more sort of line weights, it's got more curvature of the objects, it's got a sense of 3D-ness that also Nervous Dad doesn't necessarily have. The old school is more stylized, it's more bold, it's got a lot of high impact stuff, it's a big statement piece, it's boom in your face. So yeah, there's a lot of difference between the two of them, but I'm really hoping that they kind of help you guys out and you can really see the difference between the two of them. But yeah, people, that is how you draw a Neotrad's Skull and Rose and an old school Skull and Rose, and that is the difference between them. Hope you like it. Check out my videos. I'm Big Broken Puppet, and I'll see you next time. Peace.